The 2025 draft is loaded with future franchise tackles, but which ones made our top 10? Let's dive in. The offensive tackle class in the 2025 NFL draft isn't as exciting as we're used to seeing, but we still have some great players, Ryan. Our consensus rankings, we've got 3 tiers as always. Tier 3 being developmental starters, guys that we think could go on to becoming quality players, but at the very least, just have some nice tools that they'll stick around on an NFL roster as they improve and bulk up and get better. The 3 guys that we have in tier 3, Ryan, are at number 10, Charles Grant from William & Mary, number 9, Cameron Williams from Texas, and number 8, Anthony Belton from NC State. I feel like our attention immediately goes to Charles Grant, who you and I are both very, very big fans of.
Yeah, I think that physical development in different perspectives is important for all 3 of these players, but I think we've talked about it a ton, obviously, about Charles Grant from William & Mary, because he was a young man that for the majority of his William & Mary career, Joe, he was playing about like 285 pounds. Luckily, he's been able to now kind of balloon over 300. He was 311 pounds at the combine. This kid has great length, right around 35-inch arms. He's got great movement skills, really good lateral mobility. If he is able to now hold that weight and continue to improve his play power, I think that he is a future starter in the NFL in the long term.
I've been such a big fan of Charles Grant in tracking his progression. Now that he's over 300 pounds, it is awesome for him and what he's going to be able to do in the NFL. He could play any role on the offensive line. He's got the foot speed. He's got the flexibility to play center. He could also play guard if he adds a little bit more strength and then has the length to stick outside at tackle. Cameron Williams is a little bit of an enigma. I've heard some interesting things about like who he is as a player and what makes him tick. But I really like Anthony Belton sitting at this 8 spot. We both had him ranked 9th in our rankings, but he rose a little bit from our general consensus. His technique improved a ton from last offseason to this year, and I think that that's a big driving force why he deserves to go somewhere on day 2, maybe early day 3.
I really think that it's really cool that we actually have Belton and Williams right next to each other, Joe, because they're guys that I think both needed to lose a little bit of bad weight, need to continue to firm up that frame. They both have a lot of athleticism that they bring to the table. And especially when you talk about Belton, he was obviously the offensive tackle for NC State right after Aquanu got drafted by the Carolina Panthers in the top 10 a couple years ago. And you saw it immediately. He has length. He has foot quickness. He has generally the talent to become a starter. The problem, though, is that he's ballooned a little bit at times. He's been a little bit too heavy. If he's able to kind of harness those things, get into a good strength and conditioning program in the NFL, I think that he could be a starter at either tackle spot potentially, and he has the strength components to also play inside a guard. So I think we're talking about a potential starting offensive lineman in the NFL. My question with Belton is, does he end up as a left tackle, right tackle, or maybe potentially inside for a team?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys, by the way, that we're going to talk about today that end up having the capability to play multiple roles or could be forced to be moved inside because they just don't have the proficiency to play out at tackle. Let's move on to tier 2, though. This is our tier of future quality starters, maybe guys that aren't at this immediate second ready to become impactful starting offensive linemen, will start early on in their careers, but as they improve, could eventually become guys in year 2 or year 3 that are talked about as some of the better players at offensive tackle, or again, if they get moved inside to guard. At number 7, we have Josh Conerly Jr. from Oregon. Number 6, we have Ariante Ursary from Minnesota. And number 5, we have Chase Lunt from UConn. I think it might seem like we're low on Conerly, but I would argue that we're not. There's just a lot of names that go ahead of him. Conerly, a former 5-star, is going to get a lot of buzz in this class as maybe a late first rounder.
Well, and I think he has the potential to be, because there's a couple tackle-needy teams at the bottom of the first round, including the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think that Conerly is going to be a player that's matched with a couple of those teams regularly throughout this process. I don't know, man. I've gone back and watched Conerly multiple times, Joe, and I know we've talked about this in the past. I just can't fully buy into him. I don't know what it is, because he has the requisite length, he has the requisite athleticism, and he had a couple really nice performances, including against Abdul Carter this year. There's just something about him that's so inconsistent, I just can't buy in on him. So I'm going to be lower than the consensus. I could end up being burned in the end on it, but I just can't completely buy in to a player like Josh Conerly. Can't do it.
Right. He's one of those prospects that when you watch him, you understand why everybody else really likes him. And then you don't find yourself like really having a trait or a tool to latch onto that you're like, wow, this is this is it. These are the plays that are great for explaining why he's going to be so great in the NFL. Like, I always write down specific clip numbers that I really like for a player. I didn't have any written down for Josh Conerly because he just did enough every single play to not get caught up and give up a pressure or to give up a sack or any things along those lines, but he's not really dominating. That is where I think we sit here, that there's more domination on tape from all of these other players. I'm a really big fan of Chase Lutton from UConn, though. I think that he is so mobile for his size, and he's built and looks like a defensive end. He is not your typical tackle prospect that has, a little chubbiness on his frame. He is jacked, and he plays like he's jacked. I think that we get an exposure for him to moving and playing against more difficult competition in the preseason and in his first year. He's going to eventually becoming a really, really good starter if he lands with a team that has quality offensive line development.
He's been kind of forgotten in this class because the injury didn't allow him to participate at the Reese Senior Bowl, didn't allow him to participate at the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine. But when you talk about lateral mobility, maybe an outside zone heavy scheme, there is none better in this class at offensive tackle than Chase Lutton, whether that's on the backside outside zone, whether that's on the front side. This kid's lateral hip mobility is fantastic. It's one of the elite traits in this offensive tackle group overall. He's not the longest dude of all time, but that foot quickness and that general body composition, I think it makes up for it and is overcompensating traits for a player like Luntz.
Moving on to tier one. So to be clear here, we've always talked about like the blue chip guys. At quarterback, we didn't have a blue chip guide really, but we usually have a tier of players that we think could end up going on to become Hall of Famers, or they're going to be all pro players on a consistent basis. We don't have a blue chip tier. Our tier one is simply just plus starters, guys that we think are going to be great. Now, these guys could eventually exceed expectations and end up being great, but we think at the very least, they're going to be just really good starting offensive linemen. At number 4, we have Armand Membou. Number 3, we have Kelvin Banks from Texas. Number 2, we have Will Campbell from LSU. And number 1, we both are very big fans of Josh Simmons from Ohio State.
Joe, if I had to ask you, of all the offensive tackles in the 2025 NFL draft, who is the foregone player who can last as a blindside protector as a left tackle in the class? It's Josh Simmons, man. There's questions about whether Will Campbell can hang at left tackle, whether Kelvin Banks can handle left tackle, whether Armand Membou can move over from Missouri, where he plays exclusively at right tackle, and play left tackle. Now, it's possible that they can, but I don't have any questions about that with a Josh Simmons. If he was healthy throughout this process and wasn't dealing with the patella injury, I think he's a slam dunk top 10 player. He's going to be a first round pick because he's so athletic. He's super flexible, and he has that upside at left tackle. I am so high on Josh Simmons because he is the only foregone left tackle in this group overall that I am for sure not moving from the blind side.
Yeah, Josh Simmons is the only guy out of these 4 that we're naming that I feel really confident that once he's fully recovered from the patellar injury, that he lines up at left tackle, and he has the fluidity in his anchor. He's got the upper body strength to win in pass protection. He fits the mold of a left tackle. These other 3 guys, it's not question marks of their success. It's just question marks of where they play. Kelvin Banks could get moved to guard, as you mentioned. Will Campbell, we talk about the length. He can end up being a great tackle in the NFL because he shows the technical nuance to be really successful in the general football IQ on how to counter moves from pass rushers. But if the length does end up hurting him in the preseason or whatever, or he gets drafted by a team that already has 2 really good tackles, he could go on to be a really good guard for a team, which is not a problem. It's great to have really productive and quality guards. And then Membou, I think that I like him personally better at guard. I think that he's a little bit more compact with great arm length and great mobility. I want to get him moving in space. I want to get him pulling. I want to get him in a zone-based scheme where he's just working to the next level as often as possible because that's where he thrives. But if a team wants to treat him like Troy Fautanu from last year and say, you know what, we would much rather just take him as our best offensive lineman and plug him in at left tackle or plug him in at right tackle and then just go from there and watch him go to work. All of these players are tremendous. And I think that the biggest clear thing for anyone who doesn't like our ranking on these top 4, they're all basically bunched with the same grade. I don't know about you, but they're all basically in that same relative grade of like, these guys are all, there's very little separation. They're all good at certain things. Others are weaker at certain things. No one is perfect amongst this classification, but they're all fitting into that same conversation of players who I would just pick and I wouldn't feel upset or be like, why did you take him over him? They all belong in that same convo.
Quick rants from me, Joe. Number 2, 3, and 4 are all suffering from the same questions. Guard/tackle. Which one do they play on the NFL level? My biggest pushback on all of this conversation is everyone thinks that is such a negative. Oh, he might have to move inside the guard. No, what that creates is a floor for these players. What we're saying is if Will Campbell doesn't last the tackle, he can move inside the guard and he could be a butt kicker inside. Same thing potentially for Kelvin Banks. Armand Membou might be a right tackle. He might be a left tackle. He might be a guard. All I know is he's going to be a part of a equation that gets the best 5 offensive linemen on the field at all times. It's not a negative. It's called an evaluation.
Exactly. Folks, let us know in the comments, who do you agree or disagree on, where we placed them, anybody that we missed that we think should be ranked. Hit that like button and subscribe. We'll talk to you later.